I wanted to create a wintry scene. My first thought was, I need to go to Hobby Lobby and buy some small trees. But then I thought, hey, I'm a creative person. Surely I must have something here at home that I could use to make my own trees. It's a small project. I harvested some pumpkin seeds from one of the pumpkins that was part of my Thanksgiving decorations. After separating the seeds, I cooked them because, I don't think it would be a good idea to use a living organism in my craft project. I want to make sure they're dead. So I baked the seeds on low temperature for about 45 minutes. I didn't have any styrofoam cones to start with, so I made my own cones out of paper. This is art paper that I picked up at, I think it was Habitat for Humanity, and it's a smooth material. It's a little bit thicker than typing paper, but not as thick as watercolor paper. It'll do the job. I knew that I would be adding layers and the glue, so it will harden. I formed 3 different sizes. My paper wasn't big enough to make larger cones, so I just added more strips of paper to make them taller, because I wanted 3 trees, 1 fat, 1 skinny, 1 medium, 1 tall, 1 short, and 1 medium. I want a variety. When everything is the same size, same shape, same, texture, it gets boring. So I wanted a little variety. I want 3 different trees. Thinking about creating different textures, I pulled out some paper hearts, typically see in Valentine decorations. I don't know how many years I've had them, but anyways, here's a use for them. And I pulled out some lace trims, some string, because I have lots of string, and some beads. My initial thoughts were to make a lace tree and a string tree and a pumpkin tree. I did thin out my tacky glue by mixing a little bit of it in water. I usually pour my glue into a small bowl. I often use these little bowls. They're so useful to have, little porcelain bowls for mixing paint for a particular project, or putting ink, or whenever I want to mix water with my glue. I put it in these little bowls. And if ever I'm going to be using my paintbrush to apply glue, I put it in these bowls. Having little small porcelain bowls is a very useful crafting tool, I guess you could say. Before beginning, I covered my work surface with waxed paper because what I will be doing will get sticky. I start with a lace tree, my largest and widest tree. I am using paper heart doilies. I remember one particular snowy day in the state of Maine. It was actually Valentine's Day, when I looked at the trees and the way the snow was all sticky and clinging to the branches, and I thought to myself, they look like they're trimmed with lace. So lace seems like a very good choice for a wintry looking tree. Starting from the bottom, I covered the first tree with randomly placed doilies, and I overlay them so that I always have the fancy little edge on the bottom side. Sometimes I use the whole heart. Other times I rip it in half, or just a piece of it, depending on, what I've already got covered and what I need to cover. I had 2 different patterns, so I made sure to use both of them to have a variety of lace textures. So I use a brush to apply the glue to the back side of the doily, and then I also use the brush to smooth the lace out, working from the center to the outside edges. And sometimes I have to paint a little bit of glue over the edges just to make sure that all the edges are glued down good. I will come back to this tree to add more actual lace and some other trims, but it needs to harden first, so I set it aside. Once covered, I set aside to dry while I work on the next tree. I decided the thinner tree should be the one with string, which is a lightweight material. I have a variety of strings. People donate stuff like this to me all the time because they know that I'm crafty. I chose one that was kind of old, almost yellowed in color. I kind of like the antique coloring anyhow. This was a very fine string. I didn't want to use a big, bulky string because I'm thinking of something delicate. Delicate trees with a touch of elegance. I first painted the thinned out glue on the top portion of the tree, and I wound the string around. Once I get the beginning of it established, I became more random with the rounds, angling it downward, angling it the opposite way, straight around. I just kept varying how I wind it on the tree. I'm not covering it completely. I work down and then I go back up again if I feel like I didn't cover it enough, and until I feel like that top section is good. I'm only doing the tree a section at a time. So I work the top section. When I feel like that's got a pretty good coverage, then I put some glue on the next section down and keep winding it until I get good coverage, and I gradually work my way to the bottom of the tree. I'm not really going for a completely covered tree. I want to have the open spaces because I'm kind of thinking about texture. I go over the string sometimes with a little bit more glue to make sure that everything will stay in place, because the glue is going to stay attached to the paper in this project. When I'm satisfied with string coverage, I set this tree aside to allow to dry. Since the tree is kind of skinny, it does have sort of a little bit of a bend to it. I don't know if you can notice it. That's okay. That just makes it look more interesting. I set the tree aside to allow to dry. I will come back to this tree later to add some beads. The last tree I did was the pumpkin seed. I wasn't sure that I had enough seeds, so I determined before I began that I would use the smallest tree for the pumpkin seeds. And I did make sure that I went over this cone a couple of times with paper so it'll be a little bit stronger. I wish I had poster board. I only had a piece of black poster board, which is on my table. I was thinking, I pulled that out, that I might use it, but I wound up just sticking with the paper. I really didn't want the black because, you know, I could paint it, sure, but then that would require more time. So I'll just go with the paper. This time I used tacky glue straight from the bottle, adding one seed at a time, working from the bottom to the top like you would do shingles on a house or siding on a house. I place the rounded portion of the seeds towards the bottom and the point towards the top, because that better matches the wider circumference on the bottom of the tree and it gets more narrow towards the top. It seems to fit better that way. Thick glue. I wasn't having any issues with the seeds sliding downward because I'm going slow enough, but just in case, I would, after I got a few inches done, I would take a pause and let it sit and dry for a while before going all the way up the tree. And I did that a couple of times just to make sure that I wouldn't have any issues of gravity pulling everything down. For the very top, I tried to glue two seeds from opposite sides together, but as they were drying, they sort of separated and left a gap between them. So later, I stuck one more seed right in between those two, which actually gave a nice point to the top of the tree. Now we're back to the lace tree. It has now hardened. The multiple layers of paper has made the tree much stronger. Again, I am using a thin down glue to apply the lace strips to the tree. I place the lace on the wax paper and I paint onto the back side. I paint the glue onto the back side. I had this strip of raw lace cut off from trimming off a previous project, so I felt this would be a good place to use that scrap. I do save my scraps, and I try to always find a way to use them somehow. Since I am fully covering the lace with glue, I don't have to worry about the raw, unfinished edges of the lace. I loosely spiral the lace around the tree. This just adds more lace texture to the tree. Then I used a smaller lace trim to add even more lace texture to the tree. I also put a line of this smaller trim around the very bottom of the tree. But I'm not done with this tree. I will set that aside to dry, and we will come back to it again for one more touch. Looking through my stash, I found this string of beads that I had purchased for a previous project, but I ended up not using it. How many of you do that? You go out and you buy all these supplies, and then you wind up not using it, and so it just kind of hangs around. That's me. I do that a lot. That's how I collect a lot of stuff too. This will be the finishing touch to this tree. Working my way from top to bottom, I loosely spiraled the beaded chain. I where the chain will fall, and then put a line of glue with maybe 3 to 4 inches. Then I pressed the bead chain to the glue, working my way, spiraling down the tree. After the first line of chain was done, I felt there was room for a second line. So I placed it about halfway between the above line and the line below. And when I got to the bottom, I still had remaining chain. I measured to see if it would go all the way around the base, and it did. So I finished off the tree with the beaded chain around the very bottom. That nearly used up this chain. I still have a little piece left, but I'll save it. You never know when it'll come in handy for something. The string tree is now dry. I had on hand a small amount of beads that were left over from when I was doing decorations for my daughter's wedding. I was making brooch bouquets, and so I used a bunch of beads. Well, since the wedding, I've had these small baby jars with beads. I separate the beads sorted by colors. Well, this jar had gold, peach, and cream colored beads. I ended up using all of those beads on this tree. Great, I finished those off, that jar of colors. I used hot glue to add the beads randomly around the tree. I think this tree is finished. I placed one bead on the very top of the tree. Finally, for the pumpkin tree, I had spray painted it with a cream color. I was thinking white paint, but I didn't have any white, and I didn't want to go shopping. I didn't want to buy anything new. The cream is fine. It will give it an antique look, and I like antique things. I plan to frost it with glitter anyhow. I spray painted the pumpkin tree last night. I let it dry overnight in the workshop, not in my house, because I don't like the paint smell. I gently painted tacky glue over the seeds. In other words, I'm just lightly glazing my brush along I'm not trying to give it full coverage. I know that the brush is going to hit mostly on the tops, and that's where I want the snow to fall, so I'm not trying to cover every inch of the seeds. I want there to be bare places and covered places. Now I will glitter it with sparkly white glitter so that it will look like glittering snow on the trees. And I really like the texture of this pumpkin seeds. I mean, I know it's kind of a repetitive texture, but it's a different texture than the others. That's why I liked it. With my tree sitting on a paper plate, which is what I always use when I'm glittering anything. This way, I can easily pour the excess glitter back into the jar. And in case I miss some areas, I could reuse that glitter. I did not have to go out shopping for supplies or materials because I worked with what I could find at home, so I spent no money on this project. I hope it inspires you to try to make your own trees. I can say that my trees are original. Nobody has trees just like mine. And yours, if you make it from what you have at your house, they'll probably be like nobody else's, so you can have original looking trees. If you need more ideas, check out Pinterest for ideas to inspire you. You can make trees out of so many different things. I have a board under Holiday Decor with a subsection DIY trees for a whole bunch of different ideas for making your own trees. I am satisfied with these trees. They have achieved my goal of completing my winter scene, and I didn't even have to leave home to create them. I hope this inspires you to work with what you have to make your own holiday decor. I hope you have a wonderful Christmas. Thanks for watching.